Well, this is Alex at Comic Book Historians here at Emerald City Comic Con in Seattle 2021. I'm excited to show the viewers around here at the convention center, looking at different booths and chatting with various comic book professionals. Let's get started. Bob McLeod, co-creator of the New Mutants. Bob, how are you?
Very good. How you doing?
Good. So couple questions. I kind of did a little research. So you trained at the Art Institute at Fort Lauderdale, is that right?
Unfortunately, it was not a accredited school. I found out after I attended it, and I really didn't learn anything there.
What kind of art was it? It wasn't comic art then?
No, they were teaching more commercial art. One of the projects was doing a lot of little fingernail polish bottles, product design, that kind of thing, advertising.
So then how did you come to meet like the continuity people, Neal Adams, and then get referred over to the Marvel production department?
I just happened to run into someone who had been in my high school art class when I went up to New York to try to get into the business. Pat Broderick was attempting to start his career at the same time, and I met him. He got into the D.C. apprenticeship program that they were having at the time and met Neal Adams when he was up at D.C. Comics. And he said, "Oh, you got to meet Neal Adams. He'll help you get started." So I went and showed Neal my samples, and he just picked up the phone and got me a job in the production department of Marvel doing lettering corrections. So it was a great place to start because I could show all the editors my samples, and a few months later, started getting some regular freelance work.
And so, did you meet like John Verporten also?
John Verporten's the one who hired me. He was a production manager. Big gruffy guy, but very nice, and was always good to me.
So then also you were part of the Krusty Bunkers inkers as well, right? Because you see that credit Krusty Bunkers on some of the Marvel magazines then.
Yeah, anybody who walked into Neal's Continuity Studios basically could be part of the Krusty Bunkers. So it was a great learning process being inking with the Krusty Bunkers because I was just starting out and didn't really know how to ink very much. And you could watch Neal Adams inking, Russ Heath inking, and learn through observation how to do the job. And then Neal occasionally would make a comment or two on my inking. And we got paid at Neal's inking rate, which was the top rate in the business, even though I was nobody and just starting out. So it was really, really a great opportunity.
So, because I spoke with Carl Potts, who had some experience there, and Joe Rubinstein also. So do you feel like Neal was instrumental in having like a next generation of talent come through into the industry?
Neal was so responsible for so many, helping so many of us get our start. He was always very supportive of other artists getting a break into the business. He's I can't say enough about how much he's done for other artists. Yeah.
Now, you were inking Marvel magazines. So you're also working with DC Comics as well, Marvel Comics. Was that primarily inking, or were you also penciling? And because that's like now you're going 70s to like early 80s there.
Yeah, my inking career took off earlier. I was going to originally be a humor artist, maybe work for Mad Magazine or have my own newspaper comic strip.
Because you did Crazy Magazine?
Crazy was my first work. Yeah, because that's what I intended my career to be. But then I kind of got sucked into doing the dramatic comics, the superheroes. And my first penciling for superheroes was like 5 years after I started inking. So most of my early work was inking. And then I started penciling and inking. And I did some fill-ins. Then finally the New Mutants.
So then tell us about co-creating the New Mutants with Chris Claremont. How'd that come about?
I had done a couple issues of fill-ins on the X-Men that they liked, the editor liked, and Chris liked. Chris was the writer for the fill-ins that I did.
And the editor is Louise Simonson?
Louise Simonson, one of my favorite editors, responsible for a lot of the jobs that I ended up doing for Marvel. Anyway, they liked what I did on the X-Men and offered me the New Mutants. They actually offered me the X-Men as well. They needed a penciler on the X-Men at the time. And I really wanted to draw the X-Men. And I didn't know if the new book that they were talking about was going to be a success or not. And it was kind of a gamble, but I could be the co-creator on this new series. and I really couldn't turn that down. So I chose to do the New Mutants, and it was a great opportunity.
So you worked on that first graphic novel. You also penciled the first few issues, and then you went over to inking, right? At that point, is that correct?
Yeah, I wasn't. It was my first regular penciling assignment, and my inkers was pretty inexperienced as well, and I wasn't really happy with the way the book was looking, and I thought I could control the look better if I switched over to inking somebody else's breakdowns, because I had been inking several years, and I was really confident on my inking, but with my penciling, I was being very rushed, and I needed time to think about how to pose the figures and everybody, because it was my first penciling series. So I just thought it would work better if I took over the inking. So I tried that for a few issues. Still wasn't happy with it, so I ended up leaving the series after about issue number 8, I think.
And then you also went and did some other iconic things, because you also inked Mike Zeck on Kraven's Last Hunt. Is that right?
Yeah, Mike and I started around the same time, and we were friends, and he always liked the way I inked his work, so he offered the Kraven series to me when he got that assignment. And really, an amazing series. He started out with really finished pencils on the first few issues, and then the last half went to breakdowns because of deadlines, and I always preferred inking breakdowns because I could put more of myself into it. So I had a lot more input in the last 3 issues than the first 3 issues.
Then you also worked under some editor-in-chiefs, probably Marv Wolfman, Archie Goodwin, Jim Shooter. Did you encounter differences in their editing styles between the 3?
Yeah, everybody's pretty different. Most of them were hands-off unless you had some kind of problem. But I learned, again, starting in production, I knew what they were looking for. I saw everybody's art come through in the production department, and I knew exactly what they wanted us to do. So I never really had any issues where I needed to redo anything for the editors. So basically, they would just give you an assignment and you take it home and do it and turn it in. There wasn't a lot of discussion usually. So I never had any problem with any of the editors. Jim Shooter, I know he's had somewhat of a reputation for being a little difficult to work with, but he was always great with me, and I never had any problems.
When and why did you go over to DC Comics then?
Well, every company wants you to work for them instead of the competition. So when I would switch over to DC, they'd offer me a $5 raise. And then if I went back to Marvel, I'd get another $5 raise. So I was always kind of just going back and forth, for one thing, to get a raise, and because different opportunities would come up, and you'd say, I really like to work on that, and, it's at the other company, so I'd go over and try to get it.
Now, you also helped launch 1991 Superman Man of Steel, is that right? And how did that come about? And was that with Louise also?
No, Louise is at Marvel, and that was a DC project, and I was actually inking Dale Keown over at Marvel on the Hulk, and Jerry Ordway, one of the Superman writers and pencilers, came over to Marvel to the office and saw me there, and he said, why don't you do more penciling? I always liked your penciling. And I said, well, I don't know, I was just having a good time inking Dale here. And he said, well, we need a new penciler on the Superman books. Would you be interested in coming over and giving it a try? And so Superman was their main comic I read as a kid, and I was very excited to have that opportunity. So I dropped the Hulk and went over to DC, and they just happened to be doing the Man of Steel at that time, and a couple other things. And then I started penciling for Action Comics.
How was penciling over at DC compared to Marvel? Those are different styles of script, aren't they?
They used to be very different in the 60s and 70s, but as time went on, there was so much crossover between the editors and the writers and the pencilers between the two companies that they became more similar. So generally, Marvel would work from plots and DC would work from finished scripts, but not always. So the work that I did on Superman for DC was from a plot. So the actual dialogue wasn't there when I was doing the pages. Maybe some suggested dialogue, but it was often changed. So you had to kind of just leave room for whatever the writer might want to say in your compositions, and just do your best to tell the story the way you think it should be told, and then the writer would work from what you had drawn and what you had given him to write the dialogue.
You also did some work with the Phantom comic strip. Is that correct?
Yeah, in the 2000s, work was getting a little bit harder to get at Marvel and DC. There was a lot more worldwide competition. And I didn't feel like going around to every editor I knew in the business trying to look for work. When I got an offer to do the Phantom for a Swedish publisher, Egmont, I thought I'd try that out. So I did that for a couple years, inked some issues over Paul Ryan, and then penciled and inked my own issues. And it was a lot of fun. I always liked the Phantom.
Yeah. Did you read the Lee Falk Phantom?
That was one of the comic strips in our paper when I was a kid. Yeah, so I was always a fan of that.
Lee Falk is very witty. I like his stuff too. Then tell us about Superhero ABC.
Well, around that same time, I had always wanted to do a children's book, and I had some time on my hands finally. Like I said, the work was slowing down a little bit. And so I was looking around for an idea for a children's book, trying to decide what to do. And my wife actually said, you know so much about superheroes, why don't you do a superhero alphabet book? I thought that was a great idea. Why didn't I think of that? So I gave it a shot. I had never written anything, but I decided I would try to write it myself because it's just an alphabet book. How hard could it be? And I used a lot of alliteration and just came up with my own characters for each letter. And that was hard too because so many character names are already taken in the comics. So I just came up with some silly names for characters and luckily met someone in the book business who helped me get to the editor, and I got an offer from HarperCollins, one of the major publishers. So that worked out great, and the book's still doing well after all these years. That was 2006, and it's still in print, so I'm been very lucky.
And you've also done some editing. You edited Rough Stuff with Tomorrows as well, right?
Yeah, that project came along, and again, I said, well, you know, I'm not an editor. I've never edited anything, but they had confidence in me, and I had done a little bit of writing for Back Issue magazine, Tomorrow's Back Issue magazine, and they liked what I did there. So they said, give it a try, and I said, okay, I'll give it a try if you want me to. And so I would get different artists that I knew in the business to send me samples of their work, and then let them talk about it, and I did interviews, and I did some writing on various things for the magazine myself. So I really enjoyed it. Unfortunately, sales weren't really there. Everybody, I never heard a bad word about it. Everybody liked it, but the distribution and sales just weren't there, and so we only did a dozen issues.
Well, I appreciate everything you've done in your career, and I've loved your stuff as a kid, and it's no surprise you got an Inkwell Award, Joe Sinnott Award in 2018. Thanks for chatting with us here at Comic Book Historians.
Oh, you're very welcome. Glad to do it. Thanks.
I'm talking to Bob Hall. Bob, how are you?
I'm good. How are you?
I'm doing great. Thanks so much for being a guest on our podcast some time ago, and wanted to kind of follow up and see what's going on with your career. You're doing some educational comics, coronavirus comics. I saw it was University of Nebraska Press. I was kind of looking into that. Tell us about that.
Well, it started about 5 years ago. This woman, Judy Diamond, who puts this stuff together, called me and said, would you like to do an educational comic about the measles? And I said, no. And she said, why not? And I said, I remember educational comics from when I was a kid. They were pretty boring. They're pictures of scientists in white coats with pointers and blackboards. And she said, no. We want to have you do a fantasy that will draw the kids in and make it feel like a Marvel comic and come up with something. And we want you to write it with the help of some scientists. And so I said, I think I can do that. So I stole a little bit from Ray Bradbury and a little bit from Freddy Krueger and created a carnival barker who gets into the dreams of kids who are susceptible and unvaccinated and takes them to the Carnival of Contagion, where they learn all about the measles but also catch the measles. And so we went on from there to do one about mosquitoes and what would happen if we killed off all the mosquitoes, which it turns out mosquitoes are pollinators. I didn't know that. then the coronavirus hit, and these are all National Science Foundation grants. And we were offered a grant to do a weekly comic page for kids explaining the coronavirus, which was great fun and felt useful, but also interesting because we were in the same shape as Dr. Fauci. We were doing one this week, and then we would find out something different the next week, and we would have to deal with it. It was also my first chance to draw funny animals. We decided to have funny animals be the hosts for this to help pull kids in. So we've just had a lot of fun with it. It's at you can see it at World of Viruses. If you just Google that, it will start to pop up. Now I am, in fact, I'm passing out solicitations at this convention. We're doing one again. The National Science Foundation requested that we do one on vaccine hesitancy, and we in fact turned it down because it was offered at about the time when we thought this was ending. None of us were wearing masks anymore. And the National Science Foundation, as it should be, was smarter than we were and refused to accept the rejection and said, no, we want you to go ahead and do it anyway. And so we're soliciting 33 pages from other artists. They can be kids, professionals, whatever, and having to do with people's takes on vaccine hesitancy. It can be about trying to convince people to get vaccinated, but I'm also very interested in seeing people express what their doubts are, so that we're at least listening. And then I'll do 10 pages, which I'm trying to come up with a concept for. That will be the spine of it. I think it's going to be about aliens coming back to the Earth expecting to see dinosaurs and instead see human beings battling a pandemic. So that's what I've been doing.
Yeah, that's wonderful. And it's interesting because educational comics go back quite a few decades. And Max Gaines, Bill Gaines' father, was doing educational comics, which became EC Comics at some point under his son. But it's cool that you're continuing that in a much cooler way. And I did look at the funny animals. There's even one last panel looked like Mickey Mouse's head, kind of. But I think it was just a mouse, probably, right?
Mouse. Yeah, mouses have big ears. They have big round ears in comics. But we made a big effort to not make her look like Mickey because Disney will sue you.
Yeah, they will.
Yeah, I was working for Marvel as an editor about the time that the Howard the Duck debacle happened.
Yeah, and they had some demands on how Howard needs to look to be separate from Donald, right?
Yeah, and unfortunately, the good part was that he looked like Donald. Without Donald, it ceased to become satire, and because the whole thing was about, hey, there's another dimension where there probably really is a Duckburg, but here's this guy that resembles Donald Duck, and they didn't go for it. I'm hoping maybe now that they own Howard the Duck, which I think is very ironic, that they may let him go back to looking like he ought to look. But then I'm not running Disney, so.
Yeah, because he was on the Guardians of the Galaxy movie, and you could tell he didn't look like Donald in that. He looked like an alien duck or something like that.
Yeah, he shouldn't be wearing pants. That's the big deal.
That's a good point. That was the big deal. You're right. Well, Bob, thanks so much for chatting with us today. Appreciate it.
Enjoyed it.
My best friend, Josh Berman, owner of Hash Agency. Josh, thanks so much for showing me around Seattle and the overall convention.
Anytime. I always love to show you around my wet city when I get a chance.
Well, now D.M.C. of Run D.M.C., Darryl McDaniels, is here at the convention. Josh has actually managed hip-hop groups in the past. I love comic books. Let's go talk with him.
Really excited about this. I know he's got a very interesting story.
D.M.C., Darryl McDaniels. Darryl, how are you?
What's up? I'm doing really, really good.
So you actually grew up on comics, right? I actually know that you've read comics since you were a kid.
Since kindergarten, I saw my first comic book. I think it was a Batman, and I didn't know what the hell it was saying, But just the way it looked, I said, I gotta have that. So by buying that first comic book in kindergarten, it made me want to be a good student so I could understand what was in these books. So first grade and second grade, I excelled and was on the honor roll every year. And that's when I discovered Marvel comic books. And the thing about Marvel that was so powerful, Stan Lee was a genius because he put the superheroes in New York City. So it was something I could relate to every time I opened up a Marvel comic book, because I was a kid that couldn't leave the block. I got a geography lesson and a history lesson about the city that I really lived in. Then I discovered that Peter Parker comes from where I come from. So after that, it was over. So all I did as a kid was read, collect, and draw comics.
So this was like 1970, roughly, this was going on?
69.
69.
70, 71, 72 was second grade. 73, 74, 75, 76, 77, 78. I heard hip-hop, didn't care nothing about it. But then in 79, Rapper's Delight dropped, and Grandmaster Cash Rhyme talking about Superman was the only thing that made me interested in the hip-hop thing, because it was about superheroes. So when I saw that, I started hearing more of the hip-hop that was going on in New York City. And I said, oh, wow, you could tell stories about who you are over music. So all I was doing was writing these comic book adventures on the microphone about me being the most powerful entity in the hip-hop universe. So before hip-hop came over the bridge from the Bronx, and before 70s rock radio and folk rock music, all I did was focus on comic books. But hip-hop allowed me to let out what was coming into me via the comic books.
Wow. That's incredible continuation in relationship to the music and your music career. So then when you were reading the comics and in the height of that comics reading in the 70s, what were you looking at, like Jack Kirby stuff? What kind of stuff were you looking at around that time?
I was looking at Jack Kirby stuff. I was looking at John Romita, I think. One of the legendary artists, Sal Buscema. Oh, yeah. All of those guys, and all of the books of the 70s were the mosaic of my existence. Yeah. Beginning with Jack Kirby. Jack Kirby's, his art was alive, and it transcended racial boundaries and religious boundaries and political boundaries. And Jack Kirby's art was the catalyst to all the great artists that followed. So Marvel comic books was a huge influence on the way I saw the world, because of the artists like Jack Kirby and Sal Buscema, who actually did issue number 1 of my D.M.C. comic book series. So all of that influence was coming into me, but I had no way to let it out. But hip hop gave me the opportunity to let it out. If you listen to my records, all the Easter eggs was already there. Crash through walls, come through floors, bust through ceilings, and knock down doors. Rappers don't do that. Superheroes do that. But I spoke those things on the record, and everything that happened in my career was me crashing through walls, changing this genre called hip-hop when I put rock and roll together like a superpower. So I didn't know all of that was setting me up to years later to go back to the thing that gave me my energy, which is comic books. So 5 years ago, I started Darryl Makes Comics, another expression of Darryl McDaniels.
So tell us about D.M.C. Comics. What are the comics about? And what have you enjoyed the most about being part of the comic universe?
The most exciting thing about being a part of the comic book universe is I get to work with all the excellent creators, such as Amy Chu. Amy, wave. Amy Chu over there. I get to work with Amy Chu. I get to work with Larry Hama. Oh, yeah. Big shout out to Larry. Yeah, I get to work with, yes, G.I. Joe. He's brilliant and marvelous. And I get to work with all these comic book creators who have built this wonderful dimension, this wonderful universe that continues to inspire, motivate, and educate. And by that being said, that was the motivation behind the D.M.C. comic book, because I was already doing that with my music. So the D.M.C. comic book basically is, in this universe, my superpower is hip-hop and rock and roll, which I use to make the world a better place and kick the bad guys' asses. The comic book is me, Darryl McDaniels, the same D.M.C., but I don't rap, I never meet Run. I actually graduate from St. John's University because education is important, and I discover that I have superpowers. Now, in the book, there is hip-hop. I'm not rapping, but there's hip-hop, there's rock and roll, there's punk rock, there's opera, there's heavy metal, there's breakdancing, there's ballet, there's monsters, there's aliens, there's wizards, there's warlocks, there's dinosaurs and vampires and zombies and gods and angels and devils. So, and there's depression and there's racism and there's political exploitation. So everything that exists in this world and everything that exists in all of our imaginations that could be an obstacle or adversity is what the superhero D.M.C. in this universe is fighting against. But he's slowly discovering that he has the powers to overcome everything that's coming at him, but he's not sure where the hell it's coming from. So that's one of the things that people are going to go for the journey. I'm going to take you inside the mind, in the spirit, in the soul of this guy who represents all of us.
Yeah, that's inspiring. Overcoming all odds, discovering power within. It's a beautiful message.
Well, it's something that all of us possess. And Larry Hama and Amy Chu, wave again. It's something that Larry Hama and Amy Chu is teaching me how to connect with people. Because I'm not doing this comic book so that 10 years from now, y'all can say, yo, remember that comic book D.M.C. had? No, this is something that is way bigger than me. 150 million years from now, when they talk about the MCU and they talk about DC and they talk about Fred Flintstone and they talk about Mickey Mouse and Disney, everybody that's about to come in the DMC universe needs to be mentioned right along with them. That is the vision and that is the goal, to have the DMC universe a part of your mind, body, and soul, the same way that the DMC Run DMC music is. Like, it's that season right now, and it's getting ready to be Christmas time. So they're getting ready to start playing Christmas in Hollis. You would never have thought that Christmas used to be just Nat King Cole and Ben Crosby and Frosty the Snowman. That all changed because of the genre of hip-hop, because now Christmas in Hollis will be played along with all the Christmas songs until the end of our existence. So the goal for this comic book is the same thing. Like I said, it's not a hip-hop comic book, but hip-hop is in it, but also everything else. So I wanted to create, just like I did with my music, something, an experience that everybody, race, creed, color, and religion could relate to. But more importantly, everything I'm doing is just a tribute and celebration of why the 100-year-old man loves comic books and the newborn baby loves comic books. I'm going to give you something to fill out the everything in between.
Now, clearly comics influenced a lot of the New York rap scene. I mean,
Oh, for sure. You can tell because of Wu-Tang,
right.
because of Pete Rock,
Yep.
MF Doom.
Yep.
So it's not a new thing.
Absolutely.
Because if hip-hop never existed, comic books was already in the culture through the graffiti artists. Go back and look at all the art of the graffiti in the late 60s and 70s. On those trains and all those walls were Spider-Man, then Batman and Superman and Charlie Brown. The reason being is all of us in the world are products of pop culture. I sit before you, not just Marvel comic books. I'm the Brady Bunch. After school every day, my whole life from kindergarten to damn near 12th grade, I come home from school, my mother said, do your homework, eat your dinner, then you can watch TV. Every day I got home from school, the Brady Bunch was on. I'm the Monsters. I'm the Adams families. I'm Fred Flintstone. I'm Rolly Woodpecker. I'm Popeye. I love the old Popeye black and white movies. I'm also the Godzilla movies. I'm also so old school but eternal. I'm also Boris Karloff and Bela Lugosi. All of us, if you was fortunate enough to be alive, we all I Dream of Jeannie. And all your little horny little guys would watch I Dream of Jeannie because Barbara Eden was beautiful. So we are all products of pop culture. Everything we listen to, everything we watch, everything that we create. So that being said, that's who I am here. That's why everything that I do is so great. It's not that I'm a genius. It's because I am you. But you're me too. Inspiration is a two-way street. So, what your D.M.C, I like your music. That inspires me. And then I say thank you back to you, and you say you feel good. So we live in a creative world. That's why it's the arts that succeed where politics and religion fails. The writers, the journalists, the cartoonists, the movie makers, people such as yourself, we are the ones that have all the solutions to end every problem that exists in the world. But some people are knuckleheads. So for me, I had to use music, and now I'm going back to my first energy, the comic books. Right. But I don't have any effect if I ain't got you to speak to you when you ask a question that you already know the answer to tell the world, because maybe what we're doing, me and you, will touch somebody. That's what all of this superhero, Bugs Bunny, pop culture stuff is about.
That's fascinating. So I had no idea that comics were so influential in the early 70s, 80s hip-hop scene.
Yes, thank you. Right. People that didn't care about Wu-Tang, because they say they love Kung Fu movies, oh, I like this group now. All the walls, all the bias, you know what I'm saying? So for me, what I did to y'all, I subconsciously let y'all know that I'm really a superhero, but I was just faking that I was a rapper. Crash through walls, come through floors. No rappers rap like that. Jay-Z, Eminem, they ain't that dynamic. But I had to do it in a medium so I could fit in with those guys. But when I came into this world, it was meant for me to be the most powerful entity in the hip-hop universe. Superheroes. Thor is the son of Odin. I'm the son of Bifrost. The son of Odin from Asgard, got a brother named Loki, he has a hammer. Well, Darryl McDaniels is the son of Bifrost. I got a brother named Alfred. I'm from Hollis, he's from Asgard, and I got a Mike. Son of Bifrost, brother of Al. Banner's my mother and runs my pal. It's McDaniels, not McDonald's. These rhymes are Darryl's, those burgers are Ronald's. Everybody understand that. I ran down my family tree, my mother, my father, my brother, and me. So when I said that rhyme, the reason why you loved it so much was like a comic book. I'm the king of rock. The King of Rock song is basically, you get who's this D.M.C character? You open it up, and the first page, it shows me kicking some bad guy's ass. I'm the king of rock. There is none higher. Sucker MC. It was all, you know what I'm saying? Everybody else's flow, you know, Eminem's very lyrical. Nas is a wordsmith. Wu-Tang has got all the wordplay. My shit was trumped all of that. I just came and said it in a way. The reason why I was so powerful, because you were already experiencing everything I was doing.
If you had an alter ego back then, who was it in comics?
It was Captain America. Because he was frozen. And he had all this stuff in him. And when he came out into the world was different. So he had to stick to his morals. Think about that. Yeah. So when I was a little kid, I used to love reading Captain America. Because even now, it's like I've been frozen and now they got all this new hip-hop shit running around. You know what I'm saying? All this new hip-hop is outright running around. Some people hate it, some people love it. They don't know what's going on. Going to Catholic school, getting bullied, teased, and picked on. I still had to stick to doing what's right, even though I knew everybody else is going to change and try to take advantage of the advantages that are given to us. I also related to Peter Parker. They didn't exist in my neighborhood because everybody else was selling drugs in a gang and doing all this other crazy stuff that I wanted to be a superhero to stop. So in my comic books, I was like, if I could be that in this world, how could I be that? Darryl McDaniels becomes the devastating mic controller. Darryl McDaniels becomes the King of Rock. So y'all related to that without subconsciously know. I'm just emulating what I was getting from in the comic books. It wasn't like I was this drug dealer and made a bunch of rap records and this black ghetto music. No, that's not my story. I never been to jail. I don't want to go to jail. I like my freedom. I never sold drugs, and I ain't trying to shoot nobody. I'm trying to stop people from doing those. How do I do that? Oh, let me become a hip-hop artist.
It's beautiful. Thank you so much. I really appreciate your time, Darryl. Talking to Joe Rubinstein. So, Joe, tell us about training under Dick Giordano over at Continuity, and tell us about some of the lessons of inking, and do you still use those lessons today?
Well, I mean, Dick was a great guy, and he would take out time, what he was doing, to give me a lesson if I needed a question answered. And sure, everything Dick taught me I still use to this day.
And you're a realistic painter. Were you already a realistic painter back at that time, and has that factored into your inking?
Well, I mean, I was trying to paint since the age of 16, and I started doing comic books at 17. And yeah, the realism understanding of anatomy and lighting and all that certainly was helpful to solidify the pencils that were in front of me, especially when there were layouts.
You're famous for inking the most number of characters in comics, the Handbook of the Marvel Universe, DC's Justice League. Tell us how that was in real time, and did you feel that you improved as an inker during that time, or do you feel that it was a really steady artistic experience for you?
Well, I mean, it was probably the best job an inker ever had, because all I had to do was ink one figure, and I also solicited people who never got inked by anyone else, like Joe Kubert, John Bolton, John Severin, Alex Toth, but he backed out. And I don't know if I improved or not. You'd have to tell me that, but I certainly had to stretch to accommodate all the different styles in front of me. And in one form or another, I did the project for 20 years.
Tell us about the facial expressions and the characters. Frank Miller's Wolverine, Jim Starlin's Adam Warlock. You created those faces, and a lot of the iconic pictures that we see are faces that you fleshed out. How would you pick those faces?
Well, I didn't create any of them, but whatever Frank and Jim gave me, and everybody else, Byrne, I would think about somebody real who I thought the character resembled, and then I would try to more fully solidify it, because I had a concept in my mind of where I was going with the pencils.
You're also working on Power Comics, and their mission is to kind of have that 70s, 80s Marvel look. Tell us about that.
Yeah, well, it's a series of comic books. I think we're going to be doing a fundraiser, whatever that's called, soon. It's people whose work you know and like. It's Val Mayerik and Al Milgrom and Alan Weiss, Ron Wilson, my inks, others. And they just want to get back to what old-fashioned comic books looked like, because, you know, modern comic books are fantastic looking and incredibly well colored, but they're a little crowded. And I think what they're trying to do over at Power is give it a more open, airy look like comics used to have.